You know, looking back now, I can see how everything in our life had been slowly unraveling, but at the time, it felt like life was just life. Gloria and I had been married for 10 years, 10 long, comfortable years. The kind of marriage where routines define your days, and surprises are more likely to come from a forgotten grocery list than anything exciting. I'm Adam, by the way, an ordinary guy, I suppose. I worked in real estate, which might not sound like much, but let me tell you, I knew how to hustle. By our 10th anniversary, Gloria and I were sitting on a solid nest egg. I wasn't always the guy with the nice car or the big house, but I damn well made sure we had those things when the time came. And let's not forget our investments. With everything combined, we were worth a solid $5 million, not that Gloria ever seemed to appreciate the numbers. Her interest always lay in spending, never saving. Gloria. Well, where do I begin with her? I met her at a charity event for a children's hospital. She was the kind of woman who could stop a room cold, dark hair, a sharp smile, and eyes that locked onto whatever they wanted and didn't let go. Back then, I was what you'd call starstruck. She was captivating, and I had no problem doing whatever it took to make her happy. We moved fast after that first date, married within a year, and bought a house in the suburbs not long after. Life was good, for a while at least. But something changed. Over time, Gloria became restless. It was subtle at first, just complaints about the house, the neighborhood, the car. Then it was me. You're always working. Adam, when are we going to do something exciting? And I admit, I wasn't around as much. Real estate isn't exactly a 9-to-5 gig, but I was doing it for us, for her. I built a future for us, and all she seemed to see were the cracks. We had no kids, so there was no distraction from the tension that began creeping in between us. At first, I tried to dismiss it, chalked it up to typical marriage woes. Every couple has rough patches, right? But then things started to get strange. Gloria had always been private, but lately, she'd developed a habit of guarding her phone like it held state secrets, always tilted away from me, always with a lock on it. At night, while I scrolled through Netflix, she'd be texting someone, her face lit up with this distant smile she never seemed to give me anymore. I didn't want to be paranoid. I mean, come on, who wants to be that guy? The suspicious husband who thinks every little thing means something's wrong. But damn it, something was wrong, and I could feel it in my gut. It wasn't just the phone. There were the unexplained late nights. Gloria always had an excuse, some new friend or a girl's night out, and while I wanted to believe her, the way she avoided eye contact told me a different story. I began noticing little things, clothes I'd never seen before, expensive laundry she certainly wasn't wearing for me, and a perfume that lingered long after she left the house. I worked hard to keep my suspicions under control. The worst part of it all was that I wanted to believe her. I really did. Maybe she was just bored. Maybe I wasn't enough. But the nagging thought that she was hiding something wouldn't let me rest. I remember one night, after she came home late again, I asked her where she had been. She gave me that laugh, half amused, half annoyed, and said, "Why do you ask so many questions, Adam?" That hit harder than it should have. It wasn't just the question, it was the tone, the implication that I was the problem, not her. I let it go. Like an idiot, I let it slide because I didn't want to face the reality of what I was beginning to suspect. Maybe I just didn't want to know the truth, but the signs kept piling up, and eventually there was no avoiding it. We were growing apart, and something, or rather someone, was filling the gap between us. I tried to focus on my work, throwing myself into deals and closings to ignore what was happening at home, but even there I couldn't escape it. People at the office, they could see it. My assistant, Emma, asked me once if everything was okay at home. "You seem distracted," she'd said. And she was right, I was distracted by the thought that my marriage was unraveling and I didn't know why, or worse, that I did know but couldn't bring myself to confront it. That's the funny thing about betrayal, isn't it? It creeps up on you. You never think it'll happen to you until it does, and then you wonder how you missed all the signs. By the time we hit our 10th anniversary, Gloria and I were like two strangers living under the same roof. We still slept in the same bed, but it felt like there was an ocean between us. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and just watch her, wondering who she was texting when she thought I was asleep. The glow of her phone screen was like a beacon, highlighting everything that was wrong in our marriage. But I didn't say anything. Not yet. I wasn't ready to confront her, not until I had something concrete, because I knew deep down, I knew there was more to this than just a few late nights and secretive smiles. There was something, or rather someone, lurking in the shadows of our life, waiting to tear it all apart. And I wasn't ready to face the truth just yet. Now, Gloria, she worked too. Not like me. Though her job in marketing was more of a hobby than a real hustle. We didn't need her salary, but she liked to keep busy, or so she said. For a while, everything felt fine. The dinners out, the occasional vacation, even those lazy weekends where we'd just sit around watching whatever show we were hooked on at the time. But thinking back, there were cracks I refused to see. She was always on her phone. At first, I didn't think much of it. Everyone's glued to their screens these days. But it wasn't just the phone. She'd started dressing differently too, a little more effort than usual, considering we didn't go out much anymore. I chalked it up to her wanting to feel good about herself, but part of me knew something was off. Her gym sessions went from a couple of times a week to nearly every day, and she'd come home late, flushed, her hair tousled, always with some flimsy excuse about running into a friend or having a drink after. I'm not a suspicious guy by nature, and I trusted her. 10 years of marriage, I figured, builds that kind of trust. But still, something wasn't right. The first real red flag hit me on a random Wednesday evening. She was in the kitchen, cutting up vegetables for dinner, when her phone buzzed. Gloria never left her phone out in the open ever, but this time she was distracted enough to leave it unlocked on the counter. A message flashed across the screen, just one word, soon. I felt my stomach twist. Not the kind of message you send to a colleague or a friend, is it? I should have said something then, but I didn't. I let it go, convincing myself it was nothing. I didn't want to believe the alternative. We kept living like that for a while, floating through the days, pretending everything was fine. But the distance between us was growing, and I could feel it in every corner of our life. The small talk was drying up. Dinners were eaten in silence. Even the way she looked at me, her gaze held none of the warmth that once did. It was like living with a stranger. One night she came home even later than usual. I was sitting on the couch, flipping through channels, waiting for her, when she walked in wearing a dress I'd never seen before. It clung to her body in a way that made my heart sink. She looked radiant, but not for me. No, that glow wasn't meant for me anymore. I knew it in my bones. "Where have you been?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She smiled, but it was tight. "Just out with some co-workers. You know, team building stuff." Team building at 11 o'clock at night? I wanted to laugh, but I just nodded and watched her head upstairs. There was no point arguing. She'd just get defensive. And besides, I wasn't ready to face the truth yet. I wasn't ready to admit that Gloria, my wife, the woman I'd built a life with, was slipping away from me. Still, the signs were there. I should have known what was coming. I should have been prepared. But you never really are you? You never see the knife until it's already in your back. It was a Saturday afternoon when the world I thought I knew crumbled beneath me. We had no plans that day, just another lazy weekend or so I believed. Gloria was getting ready to head out, claiming she had to meet up with some friends for lunch. I barely looked up from my laptop when she kissed me on the cheek and hurried out the door. Just routine stuff, right? I didn't follow her. I didn't have a tracker on her phone or her car. I wasn't that guy. But something gnawed at me, an itch under my skin that wouldn't go away. That same word from weeks before soon kept echoing in my head over and over again. So, I decided to step outside, not to follow her exactly, but maybe to clear my head. I grabbed my jacket, drove into town, and found myself heading toward one of the nicer restaurants downtown, the kind of place where Gloria used to take clients or meet up with her friends. Call it instinct, call it desperation, but something told me that I needed to be there. Parking a block away, I walked in through the side entrance of the restaurant, scanning the room casually. Then I saw her. Gloria wasn't alone. She was sitting at a corner table, leaned in close, talking to someone. But it wasn't the conversation that hit me like a truck. It was the way her hand rested on his, the way her fingers curled around his wrist with a kind of familiarity I hadn't seen in years. The man across from her was younger than me, tall, slick-back hair, wearing a tailored suit that screamed money. He looked sharp, confident. His name was Brad. I'd later find out a name that would soon become the punchline to the cruelest joke of my life. Gloria's smile, the same smile that used to be just for me, was directed right at him, and for the first time in months, I saw her laugh. Really laugh. I stood there, frozen, trying to make sense of it. The world felt like it had slowed down, every detail burning into my brain. The way she leaned into him, the sparkle in her eyes that I hadn't seen in so long, it was all so painfully obvious now. But in that moment I was too numb to do anything about it. My legs wouldn't move. My voice caught in my throat. Hell, I didn't even have the strength to feel angry yet. All I could feel was the weight of what I was seeing, like a cold, heavy stone sinking into my gut. They didn't notice me. And for some twisted reason, I'm glad they didn't. I don't know what I would have done. Maybe caused a scene, maybe just walked away without a word. But I stayed there, standing in the shadows like some ghost of a man, watching the woman I loved the woman I thought I loved throw herself at another man without a second thought. And then they kissed. Not just a peck on the lips, but a deep, passionate kiss that left no doubt in my mind. This wasn't just a fling. It wasn't a one-off mistake. It was an affair. The kind that burns everything down to ash. My world collapsed in that moment, and it felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down at the wreckage of 10 years of my life. I left before I could see anything more. I couldn't bear it. My hands were shaking as I got back into the car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I sat there for what felt like hours, trying to figure out what the hell just happened. How long had this been going on? How could I have missed it? All the pieces started falling into place. The late nights, the phone always hidden away, the gym sessions, the damn dress I'd never seen before. It all made sense now, and I hated myself for being so blind. But more than that, I hated her. Gloria, my wife. The woman I had sacrificed everything for. And for what? For some shiny new fling with a guy who probably had more money than sense? I drove home in silence. The house felt different when I walked back in, like it wasn't mine anymore, like she had poisoned it with her lies. Every corner of it reminded me of the life we'd built together, a life that now felt like a joke. I knew I couldn't confront her yet. I needed time to think, to plan. But the rage simmering under my skin was undeniable, and I knew this was only the beginning. When Gloria came home later that night, she acted like everything was normal. She even brought me takeout from the restaurant. Can you believe that? She kissed me, smiled, handed me a container of pasta, and sat down next to me like nothing had happened. I don't know how I managed to hold it together. I don't know how I didn't explode right there and then. But I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't going to let her get away with this. Not by a long shot. The days after that Saturday were some of the longest and hardest of my life. Every time Gloria looked at me, smiled at me, or kissed me goodbye before leaving the house, it was like a blade twisting deeper into my gut. The betrayal wasn't just a momentary lapse or a fleeting affair. No, this was deeper. I was living with a woman who had already checked out, who had given herself to another man while pretending to hold on to our marriage. But I wasn't a fool. I wasn't going to confront her in some blind rage and make things worse for myself. No, I had to play this smart, no matter how much it ate me up inside. If I was going to go down, I was taking her down with me. She didn't know it yet, but she was about to lose far more than she bargained for. I started paying attention to every little detail. I watched her closely. Every phone call, every late-night work event, every time she'd get dressed up for no reason, it all painted a clear picture. Brad wasn't just a passing fling. He was a permanent fixture in her life now, or at least, that's what she thought. I couldn't sleep most nights. The thought of them together kept gnawing at my brain, replaying over and over like some sick movie I couldn't turn off. I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how long this had been going on. How many times had she lied to my face? How many nights had she spent in his arms instead of mine? That's when I decided to dig deeper. I started checking her emails, her messages, her calendar. At first, I felt guilty about it invading her privacy like that, but after what I'd seen, the guilt evaporated quickly. I had a right to know what was going on in my own marriage, and what I found only confirmed my worst fears. There were emails between her and Brad, encrypted, hidden behind aliases, but they couldn't hide the obvious. The messages were dripping with lust, plans, and promises for the future. "I can't wait to finally be with you," she wrote. "I'll be free soon." Free, that word made my blood boil. Free from me. Free from the life we had built together. I wasn't a violent man. Never had been, but in those moments, reading her words, I understood how men snapped, how they did things that seemed unthinkable in the cold light of day. I didn't do anything, of course, but the rage, the humiliation, it consumed me. I needed to know more, so I took it a step further. One evening, when she left her laptop open, I installed a keylogger. It wasn't long before I had access to every password, every conversation, every secret she thought she had buried. I felt dirty, but there was no other way. I needed to see the whole picture before I made my move. And the picture I saw, it was worse than I imagined. She was planning to leave me. There were discussions about assets, about what she could get out of the divorce, about how Brad could take care of her financially once she left me. They had it all planned out. The only thing missing was the final push and excuse for her to file for divorce, without looking like the bad guy. But I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction. No, I was going to turn the tables on her, and Brad, too. If they thought they were going to walk away with my money, my house, my life, they were dead wrong. I began making quiet moves. First, I met with a lawyer, someone I trusted, someone who specialized in high-asset divorces. I laid everything out for him, every piece of evidence I had gathered, every dirty little secret she thought she could hide. He told me we had more than enough to protect my assets, more than enough to make sure she walked away with next to nothing, but we needed to play it smart. We moved quickly. I started pulling money out of joint accounts and moving it into ones she couldn't touch. We rewrote my will, secured my investments, and ensured that Gloria's greedy little hands wouldn't get anywhere near them. It felt good, taking control like that. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I had power in this situation, like I wasn't just some clueless husband being led to the slaughter. Gloria, meanwhile, went about her business as if nothing was wrong. She continued seeing Brad, continued sneaking around behind my back, completely unaware of the trap I was laying for her. It almost made me sick to think about how easily she lied, how she'd come home, smile at me, and pretend everything was fine while making plans to walk away with everything I'd worked so hard to build. Then came the final piece of the puzzle. I needed leverage, something that would destroy her if she tried to take me for all I was worth, something that would ruin her reputation, something she couldn't explain away with her lies. That's when I found the photos. They were on Brad's phone. I wasn't sure how to get them at first, but I had a little help from an unexpected source, Alyssa, Brad's sister. We had run into each other at a real estate event months ago, back when all of this was still under the surface. I had no idea then that she would become a key part of my plan. Alyssa hated Gloria. She hated Brad, too, for that matter. Apparently, Brad had been screwing around on his own wife, and Alyssa had no respect for that. She reached out to me after hearing rumors about Gloria and Brad's affair, offering to help me expose them. She had access to Brad's phone, his accounts, everything. It was her who found the photos, naked shots of Gloria in his apartment, in bed, even a few videos that made my stomach turn. That was all I needed. That was my ace in the hole. With Alyssa's help, I had everything. The financials, the proof of the affair, the explicit photos. Now all I had to do was wait for the right moment to strike. Gloria had no idea what was coming. It's funny how the world can change in a single day. I had all the pieces in place, just waiting for the moment to push the first domino. Gloria, in her blissful ignorance, continued to carry on with her little charade, playing the dutiful wife while sneaking off to Brad's place whenever she could. I let her think she was winning. I let her believe that everything was under control, that she was untouchable. But the time had come to tip the scales. It was a Friday evening, the kind of night where you can feel the tension in the air, like the calm before a storm. Gloria came home late again, reeking of perfume that wasn't hers, and with a smile that barely reached her eyes. She tried to hide it, but I'd long since learned to read her. Every lie she told was etched in the way she moved, in the way she avoided looking me in the eyes. "I'm sorry I'm late," she said, kissing me on the cheek. It was cold, mechanical. She headed straight to the kitchen, where she poured herself a glass of wine like she didn't have a care in the world. Long day at the office. Long day with Brad, more like. I played along, of course. "No worries," I replied, keeping my tone casual. I had learned that keeping her guard down was the key. If she smelled suspicion on me, she'd go into damage control. I couldn't have that. Not yet. As we sat down to dinner, I made small talk, asked her about her day, her plans for the weekend. She rattled off the usual lies, talking about some business trip she had planned for the following week. It was a nice touch, I had to admit. A clean break for her to start the process of leaving me without having to look me in the face. She was going to use that trip to begin the next phase of her new life with Brad, but the trip was never going to happen. As we talked, I noticed her phone light up. She grabbed it quickly, just a little too fast. She turned the screen away from me, but I caught a glimpse of the name Brad. A flash of irritation crossed her face, but she hid it with a smile as she put the phone down. She thought she was clever. But I already knew what was going on. I knew everything. It was time. I set my fork down, leaning back in my chair. "You know, Gloria," I began, my voice steady, "I've been thinking a lot about us lately." She looked up, eyes wide, probably wondering where this was going. "Oh, what about?" "I think we need to talk about our marriage," I said, letting the weight of my words hang in the air. "About what's been going on behind the scenes." Her face paled. She tried to hide it, but I saw the panic flash in her eyes. "What are you talking about, Adam?" I smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile you give someone when you know something they don't, when you hold all the cards and they're just about to realize they've lost. "You know exactly what I'm talking about, Gloria. I know about Brad, I know about the affair." For a second, she didn't move, didn't breathe. The color drained from her face as she processed what I had just said. She stammered, "I don't know what you're talking about." I stood up slowly, walking around the table until I was standing over her. "Don't insult my intelligence. I've known for weeks. The late nights, the gym sessions, the sudden business trips," I snorted. "You think I'm that stupid? You really thought you could hide this from me?" She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. She just sat there, looking up at me like a deer caught in headlights. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, opening the gallery. "Here's all the proof I need," I said, showing her the photos Alyssa had sent me, pictures of her and Brad, locked in embraces in his bed, at restaurants, the kind of evidence that no amount of lying could explain away. Her face crumpled. "Adam, Save it," I cut her off, my voice cold. "I don't want to hear your excuses. Not now. Not ever." Tears welled up in her eyes, but I wasn't moved. I'd spent too many nights crying over her betrayal, feeling like a fool for trusting her, for believing in the vows we made. Her tears meant nothing to me now. "Do you think you can just walk away from this?" I continued, my tone sharp. "You think you can run off with him, take half of what we built, and leave me with nothing? Did you really think I wouldn't find out?" Her lip trembled as she stared at the photos on my phone. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," she whispered, voice shaky. "I didn't mean for this to happen." "You didn't mean for this to happen," I scoffed, my rage barely contained. "You've been planning this for months, Gloria. I know everything. The emails, the money you've been hiding, the meetings with your lawyer. You were going to leave me with nothing." She finally broke, the tears spilling over. She looked down at her hands, her voice small. I thought you didn't love me anymore. Adam, I thought we were just going through the motions. Going through the motions, I repeated, incredulous. Do you even hear yourself? I was here, Gloria. Every single day I was here. I was working my ass off to build a life for us. And what were you doing? Screwing some other guy behind my back. She didn't respond. She just sat there, tears streaming down her face, her shoulders shaking. I had seen enough. I turned and walked toward the living room. Grabbing the envelope off the coffee table that I had prepared days ago, I tossed it onto the kitchen table in front of her. That's the divorce settlement. It's already signed. You get nothing. Her head snapped up, eyes wide in shock. What? Nothing? Adam, you can't? I can. And I did, I said, cutting her off again. You forfeited everything the second you decided to betray me. I've protected all of my assets. The money, the house, everything, it's mine. You get none of it. She looked at the envelope, then back at me, her face a mix of anger and disbelief. Brad Hill. Brad won't help you, I interrupted. You see, I've had a little chat with his sister. He doesn't know it yet, but his business is about to go under. Thanks to some bad investments I tipped off the wrong people about. He's going to lose everything, and you'll be right there with him. I didn't wait for her response. I turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving her sitting there with her world crashing down around her. She had no idea the fortune she had walked away from, the security she had thrown away for a man who was about to lose everything. As I closed the door behind me, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. I was free. I wish I could say it ended cleanly right there, that the divorce papers were signed and Gloria vanished from my life without another word. But real life doesn't work that way. People like Gloria don't go down without a fight, and she certainly wasn't about to let everything slip away so easily. The days following that confrontation were a whirlwind of tension and calculated moves. She hadn't signed the papers right away, of course. I didn't expect her to. Instead, she tried to reason with me, playing every card she had: apologies, promises, even anger. One minute she'd cry, telling me how sorry she was, how things just happened, and that she never meant for it to go this far. The next, she'd lash out, throwing blame back at me, saying it was my fault for letting the marriage die. I didn't care anymore. Whatever we had, whatever I had felt, had been burned down the moment I saw her with Brad, and each pathetic attempt to manipulate the situation only solidified the fact that the woman I'd married was gone. Maybe she'd never really been the person I thought she was. One night, after another failed attempt to get me to renegotiate the divorce terms, Gloria tried a new tactic. She came home late again, no doubt after meeting Brad, her makeup smeared and her eyes wild. She was drunk or close to it. Stumbling into the living room where I was sitting, she stood in front of me, arms crossed, her voice slurred but sharp. So this is it, she sneered. You're really going to walk away, Adam? 10 years and you're just done. I didn't look up from the document I was reading. You already walked away? Gloria. Long before I knew. She let out a bitter laugh, swaying on her feet. You really think you're going to get away with screwing me over like this? I won't let you take everything. I stood up then, the cool, detached calm I had kept up starting to crack. Take everything. You were the one planning to take everything from me. I was going to be the one left with nothing while you ran off with Brad, living off what I built. Well, guess what, Gloria, you get nothing. You lost. Her eyes flared with anger, and for a moment I thought she was going to hit me. She raised a hand like she might, but then her face crumbled, and instead she collapsed onto the couch, sobbing. I don't want to lose you, Adam, she choked out between sobs. I don't. I didn't know what I was doing. It was pitiful. Watching her break down like that, part of me wanted to feel something: pity, sorrow, maybe even the flicker of the love we'd once shared, but there was nothing. She'd hollowed me out, and I didn't have the strength to care anymore. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. It's too late for that. It's been too late for a long time. For a while, she just lay there, crying softly into the cushions. Eventually, she stood up, wiping her face with the back of her hand. Fine, she muttered, her voice cold now. You win. But don't think for a second that this is over. She staggered to the bedroom, slamming the door behind her. I sat back down, my body numb, my mind already racing ahead to the next steps. I knew Gloria wouldn't go down quietly. She would fight for every scrap she could get, and I had to be ready for that. I still had to stay ahead. The following weeks were a blur of legal battles and increasingly desperate attempts by Gloria to gain some foothold. She tried everything, accusing me of hiding assets, dragging up old arguments in court, and even going as far as to suggest I had been the unfaithful one. But I had anticipated her every move. I had been planning this for too long, and each play she made fell flat, thanks to the airtight case my lawyer and I had built. Every piece of evidence I had collected came out during the proceedings. The emails, the photos, the financial trail, it all painted the same picture. Gloria had betrayed our marriage in every possible way, and I was the one left cleaning up the mess. Brad, too, was unraveling. Alyssa had seen to that. She was ruthless in her own way, ensuring that Brad's shady investments and dealings came to light at just the right moment. His business collapsed in a matter of weeks, and with it, the future Gloria had planned on. By the time the court ruled on the divorce, Brad was neck deep in lawsuits and financial ruin. Gloria was stuck in a sinking ship, and the life she thought she was escaping to was already crumbling beneath her. When the final ruling came in, I was granted full ownership of the house, our investments, and the bulk of the assets. Gloria. She walked away with her clothes, some jewelry, and enough to rent an apartment for a few months. That was it. She tried to appeal, of course, but the courts weren't having it. The evidence was too damning, the betrayal too blatant. She had bet everything on Brad and lost. I thought that would be the end of it, that after the divorce was finalized, she would disappear, and I could move on with my life. But Gloria wasn't finished with me yet. It was a rainy Tuesday when I got the call. I had been packing up the last of her things, preparing to send them off to whatever hole she had crawled into, when my phone buzzed. It was Alyssa. We had kept in touch throughout the ordeal, and in a strange way, we'd become allies if not friends. She had kept me updated on Brad's situation, letting me know just how deep he was sinking. "Adam," she said, her voice tight with concern, "you need to be careful." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "Gloria, she's not taking this well. Brad's cut her off completely, and she's been showing up at his place, making scenes. The last time she threatened him, said she'd make sure he paid for everything." I leaned back against the wall, closing my eyes. I knew Gloria could be vindictive, but this was a new level. "What do you think she's going to do?" "I'm not sure," Alyssa replied, "but I've got a bad feeling. Just watch your back." "Okay." I thanked her and hung up, feeling the familiar weight of unease settle over me. Gloria had nothing left, no Brad, no money, no future. And when people have nothing to lose, they can be dangerous. I locked the doors that night, double-checked the windows, and went to bed, my mind racing. I didn't know what Gloria was planning, but I knew it wasn't over. Not yet. The storm that had been brewing for months wasn't done with me, and I had a feeling the worst was still to come. The storm came quicker than I expected. The morning started like any other. I had just finished a meeting and was about to head out for lunch when my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. I frowned, opening it. "Meet me at the old house. We need to talk, Gloria." The old house. Our house, the one she had walked away from, the one that now stood empty, stripped of all her things. It didn't feel like home anymore, but I still went by from time to time, getting things in order for a sale. My heart thudded against my ribs. Every instinct in me screamed to ignore it, to let her go, but something made me reply. "What do you want, Gloria?" The response came quickly. "I just need to talk. Alone." Part of me wanted to tell her to go to hell, to let her stew in the mess she'd made. But curiosity, or maybe something deeper, pulled me in. Maybe this would be it, the final conversation, the last loose thread to tie off before we both moved on. Maybe she had finally come to her senses, or maybe I was walking into a trap. Either way, I needed to face her one last time. I drove to the house, the familiar road feeling longer than it ever had. The house loomed as I pulled up, its empty windows staring down at me like eyes that had seen too much. I parked and got out, the crunch of gravel under my feet, the only sound in the still afternoon air. Gloria's car was there, parked haphazardly at the curb. I felt a surge of unease as I walked toward the door. It was already slightly ajar. I pushed it open, stepping inside. The house was cold, and the air felt thick with something I couldn't quite place. "Gloria," I called out, my voice echoing off the bare walls. There was no answer. I walked through the house slowly, tension building with every step. The silence was unsettling. When I reached the living room, I found her standing by the large bay window, staring out at the empty yard. She looked different, disheveled, tired, her once pristine appearance gone. Her hair was messy, her clothes wrinkled. She didn't turn around when I entered. "Gloria," I said, keeping my distance. "What is this about?" She finally turned, her eyes red and swollen, like she'd been crying for days. But there was something else in her expression, something darker. "You ruined everything," she whispered, her voice shaking with emotion. "Everything, Adam." I felt a cold chill run down my spine. "You did that to yourself," I replied, trying to stay calm. "You made your choices, and now you're dealing with the consequences." She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. "No, you didn't just let me go. You destroyed me. Brad left me. I have nothing, and it's all because of you." I stared at her, anger rising. "Because of me? You cheated. You lied. You tried to take everything I worked for, and now you want to blame me." Her face twisted with rage. "You think you're so righteous, don't you? Always playing the victim. But you're just as guilty." I took a step closer, the frustration boiling over. "What the hell are you talking about? Guilty of what?" "Of letting this happen," she screamed, her voice raw. "Of not loving me enough, of not caring enough. I wouldn't have gone to Brad if you had just been there for me. I was speechless. Her desperation was palpable, and for a moment I saw a glimpse of the woman I had once loved, now shattered and lost, but it wasn't enough to sway me. The damage was done. Gloria, I said, my voice low, you need to stop. This isn't going to fix anything. It's over. She stared at me, her body trembling with emotion. I can't let it be over. Adam, I can't just let you win. I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could say anything, she lunged toward the side table, grabbing something. My heart stopped when I saw the glint of metal, a gun. She pointed it at me, her hands shaking. Gloria, put it down, I said, my voice steady, though my pulse was racing. I should have left you sooner, she muttered, her voice breaking. I should have taken everything. I raised my hands slowly, trying to keep calm. You're not thinking clearly. Put the gun down, Gloria. We can talk about this. She shook her head violently, tears streaming down her face. There's nothing left to talk about. You took everything from me. I felt a knot of fear tighten in my chest. She wasn't bluffing. She was broken, completely unhinged. I took a slow step forward. This isn't going to change anything. Killing me won't fix your life. For a moment she wavered. Her hand shook, and I thought she might actually drop the gun, but then her eyes hardened again. I won't let you have the last word, Adam, I won't. She tightened her grip, and just as I thought the worst was about to happen, the front door burst open. I turned just in time to see Alyssa rush into the room, her eyes wide with shock. Gloria, stop, Alyssa screamed, running toward her. This isn't the way. The distraction was enough. In the split second that Gloria's attention flickered, I lunged forward, knocking the gun from her hands. It clattered to the floor as I grabbed her, holding her arms to her sides. She collapsed into sobs, her body shaking as I held her, both of us sinking to the floor. Alyssa stood frozen in the doorway, her chest heaving as she tried to catch her breath. She looked at me, her eyes filled with relief and horror all at once. I didn't know she was this far gone, Alyssa whispered, her voice trembling. I didn't think she'd. I shook my head, still holding Gloria, as she cried. None of us did. The police arrived not long after. Alyssa had called them on her way over, sensing that things had spiraled too far. Gloria was taken away, not in handcuffs, but in the back of an ambulance, broken and lost. I watched her go, feeling nothing but a hollow ache where my anger had once been. It was over. The fight, the betrayal, the lies, it was all over. Gloria had fallen farther than I ever could have imagined, and the woman I had married was gone, destroyed by her own choices. Alyssa stayed by my side as the house emptied out. We sat in silence for a long time, both of us processing the events that had just unfolded. Finally, she spoke. You okay? I nodded, though I wasn't sure if it was true. I will be? She placed a hand on my shoulder, offering a small, sad smile. It's over now, Adam, you can move on. Move on. The words felt heavy, but for the first time in what felt like forever, they didn't seem impossible. I looked out the window, where the sun had begun to break through the clouds, casting a pale light over the empty yard. Yeah, I said quietly. I can. As I stood up, leaving the shattered remnants of my old life behind, I knew that I had survived the storm, and whatever came next, I was ready for it.